Today I thought I'd interview my mom because by far she's the most seasoned traveler I know, and I definitely wouldn't have as big of a passion for travel if it wasn't for her. Alright, Mom, so do you want to introduce yourself to the camera?
So my name is Karen Edminson. I'm Caitlin Russell's mother. And what else do you want to know?
Okay, so I want to know some of the places that you've had the opportunity to travel to.
Well, I think it would be maybe the most prudent thing to tell you about the trip that I did around the world. Because that was a trip that I left, I was 26 years old. And I basically put a backpack on and ventured off with a trip, a one-way ticket around the world that took me a year to get around, and it eventually ended up in meeting your father. So maybe that might be the best way to go.
Alright. What were some of the stops on that trip around the world?
So, first of all, I stopped in Vancouver, and from there I went to Fiji, and I stayed for a week in Fiji on a little island called Beachcomber Island, and I just lived in a little hut on the beach and got very sunburnt feet. And then I left for Fiji, went to New Zealand, and I spent about a month in New Zealand, maybe 2 months, and traveled all around New Zealand. And then I ended up in Australia, and I was in Australia for 9 months, and I basically toured all around Australia, bought a car, drove all the way around, and worked. I worked on a basil farm there, and when I finally left Australia, I headed over to Asia, and I did lots of things in Asia, Southeast Asia. So basically I went from Hong Kong into China. That was an incredible trip because it was very difficult to get visas into China. So I saw China before it really grew into a very modern city. It was still the old China with no cars. Everybody wore red coats, and it was very different from how it is now. And saw Malaysia, Singapore, went into Thailand, spent a lot of time in Thailand, and I eventually actually went back to Thailand again to do a Thai massage course, which is kind of interesting because that's what I do now, right? I'm a massage therapist now. So I actually went up into Chiang Mai and stayed there for 2 months studying massage. And I also went to Japan on that trip. So with the idea that I would go back to work there, and that is what I did. So I went basically through all those countries over the span of 10 months, and then I ended up having to forgo the rest of my trip. So that trip was back in the days when you could buy this trip. You spent, I think I bought the ticket for $1,200, and it was a trip around the world. You could stop in as many places as you wanted to go, as long as you were keeping going in the same direction. And you had to be back in Toronto, which was my place of departure, within 1 year. So at 10 months, I realized that I still had India to get to, because I wanted to go to Tibet, and I wanted to do a little bit of that mountain.
Mount Everest.
Mount Everest, thank you. I wanted to do a little trek through Nepal and Mount Everest, but in fact what I did was I surrendered my ticket because I knew I wasn't going to get all the way back in time, and I just went back to Japan and worked. And that was when I met your dad.
Okay, so I'm really jealous of that trip, but I want to know how traveling throughout your life has shaped who you've become today.
So, well, first of all, I wouldn't have met your dad, and you wouldn't be here if I hadn't done that trip, so that's kind of a key thing. And it also opened the door to what I do for a living now. So it opened my mind to different therapies and different healing processes that sort of got me 15 years later doing what I do. So it just kind of opened my eyes in many, many ways to where I am now.
Okay, so now I just want to know what key things did you learn from your travel experiences that you've perhaps passed on to me?
Okay. So I think the essence of travel is that what I learned was that my, wherever I am, I'm home because my heart is in my home. And so what I've passed on to you is the essence of travel is that you really just grow in that aspect. And so you had the advantage that I didn't have, and that you've started that at a very young age. And so I look at you at 19 and your zest for travel and your openness to challenge yourself to new experiences that will help broaden your understanding of you and the world has started much sooner than me. And so I think that's a great thing. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, what do you think winning this scholarship would do for me?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, it would help. It would help you to. It would help you get going for next year in terms of, your goal is to get through this course, this film studies course. So it would help you financially, but it would also help you in that your dream is to travel around the world and document it in a video, which is part of your career. And so this seems to be a good stepping stone for that, I think.
All right.
Does that help?
Yes.